This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
A very good evening to you all on Monday the 8th of May. I'm Finola Jackson and welcome to the Late Late Show. This is my first show with Teacher Talk Radio. Thank you so much for tuning in. Tonight we are talking about the unique brilliance of small and rural schools.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Good evening and thank you so much for joining me. Small but mighty certainly sums up many of the schools I've had the privilege to work in. And so we are going to unpack a little more on just how small rural schools manage to punch above their weight and be truly flourishing communities with, let's face it, so many odds stacked against them. What an exciting coronation weekend it has been. We are a nation with the fewest public holidays, certainly compared to others in Europe. So hasn't it been great to have had 2 in a row? I am loving the 4-day week, have to say. Such a good opportunity to recharge and replenish. My school, a small village school, had a wonderful coronation picnic on the school field last Friday with parents in the local community. The usual British mix of sunshine and showers, and it's been really great, hasn't it, to see schools celebrating up and down the country with maypole dancing, ice cream vans, singing, face painting, street parties, and events in village halls and local churches. How wonderful to watch something that future British children will be studying in their history lessons. I particularly enjoyed the moment when Prince William, on the balcony, leaned over to check on the King. He had a big smile on his face and just checking in to see his dad was okay and enjoying the moment. Pure love and respect in his eyes. Such a gorgeous moment. And as always, for me, Prince Louis's antics and facial expressions made it for me. When he was discreetly removed from the service, I did wonder if this was so the Home Alone protection kit could be removed from his person, or perhaps he just needed some scooter time outside of the Abbey to let off steam. Wasn't it brilliant to see Floella Benjamin carrying the coronation sceptre? As a proud play school baby, I gave a cheer to the screen at this point. Floella was my absolute favourite presenter on Play School. I read one of her tweets over the weekend, and it read, "The sceptre with a dove represents peace, mercy, equality and love," which is everything I believe in. And I'll be so excited to share this tweet with my class tomorrow and open up a discussion about this. Pomp and ceremony is something we do rather well in this country. Regardless of your views on the royal family and the rights and wrongs of their role in society, Princess Anne and Sophie Wessex stood out to me. Both women are examples of how the world we live in often overlooks the people in the background. The ones who don't shout loud or tell us repeatedly about their hard work, the values they bring and the good they do, but quite simply get on with it. They're a reminder that while the world is full of big names that we hear over and over again, behind all those people, often supporting them, are the people that quietly keep the cogs turning, dedicating themselves to service without fanfare and often without recognition. And this got me thinking about all the incredible staff who work and volunteer in small rural schools. There are so many challenges for small schools: funding, recruitment issues, limited CPD, and a biggie, of course, is Ofsted pressures, with teachers having to wear multiple hats and often lead numerous subject areas. How can it even be possible to be subject experts and lead with confidence, energy, and passion? Surely the prospect of a deep dive, certainly in the current framework, which many recognise as unfit for purpose, is absolutely terrifying and demotivating. Do get in touch tonight if you'd like to share your thoughts. Send in a text. Interestingly, only last week at the National Association of Head Teachers Conference, it was great to hear that Motion 31 was passed unanimously to recognise the unique context of small and rural schools, and this represents a very positive step indeed. Well, enough of my rambles and on to bringing in an expert. My guest is an all-round lovely person, top human being, someone who is on the ground, often in the long grass, and relentless about supporting and advocating for a real understanding of the sheer brilliance of small and rural schools. So without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce Amy Tinkler, President-elect of the Chartered College of Teaching and Small Schools Advocate. It is so lovely to have you with me tonight, Amy. Please, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and perhaps your interest in the very unique and special context of small schools?
Okay, great. Ola, can you hear me all right? I better check that first.
Yes, can hear you perfectly. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I think that was Anne's most generous introduction I've probably ever had. So my name's Amy Tinkler, and I am a primary practitioner. I've been a primary teacher for 20 years. 10 of those years have been in small schools, and most recently I've been head of school of a very small school in rural Derbyshire. We started at the school, we had 28 pupils. The school's got more than that now, but I was head of school there for 8 years. And as well as being head of school, I taught reception year 1 and year 2, and sometimes there were some year 3s and 4s in that mix as well. So as you said, my other roles are I'm a great advocate for small schools. Really, I've done lots of writing for different articles and bits and pieces about what life is like in small schools and why it's brilliant but different to life in bigger primary schools that I've worked in. I've been part of the Ofsted working group around small schools, which is interesting. And as you said, one of my favourite roles is that I'm President-elect of the Chartered College, which is a fabulous role in itself. But also it's great that small school representation in the Chartered College is there, and that's something I'm very proud to be a part of. So thank you very much for inviting me. It's lovely to be here. I'm not sure I am the expert, but I'll do my best.
Oh, that's a brilliant introduction. I think we're very lucky to have you on board with your wealth of experience. And of course, Chartered College of Teaching is a huge advocate, huge supporter of small schools. So absolutely brilliant to have your wealth of experience. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with you after the news.
This programme has been brought to you by the Happy Confident Company. Our clinically approved, ready-to-go wellbeing and mental health programme will help your pupils thrive. In only 10 minutes a day, you'll be able to deliver social and emotional learning and wellbeing tools throughout your school. To find out more, visit us at www.happyconfident.com.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The UK Labour Party will drop its commitment to abolishing university tuition fees, according to reports in a range of media outlets. This is seen by some as another reversal of pledges made by leader Sir Keir Starmer when he first became leader. He told BBC radio outlets that we find ourselves in a different financial situation than when commitments were first made. But he also added that the party was looking at a number of options for reforms to higher education funding. Sir Keir blamed shifting economic circumstances brought about by the pandemic and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Student finance was also in the news as financial expert Martin Lewis outlined the 3 main changes coming in for new university starters in England in September. Mr. Lewis was speaking on Good Morning Britain. So-called Plan 5 student loans come into effect in September, but will not affect those already at university. According to Mr. Lewis, finance is swinging further away from taxpayer funding and more towards the individual. Those starting uni in September will start repaying student loans once they reach a salary of £25,000 per year, lower than the current threshold. Currently, those with student loans cease repayments after 30 years, even if the debt is uncleared. However, new students will have to pay for 40 years or until the debt is cleared, whichever comes first. This means that graduates could end up repaying loans for their entire working life. In more positive news, the interest on these loans will be lowered from inflation plus 3% to just inflation. In real terms, this means no additional interest. Mr. Lewis went on to give detailed examples, stating that currently the taxpayer pays around 44 pence in the pound towards funding, and the student pays 56 pence on average. Under the new system, the state will pay 19 pence in the pound and the student 81 pence on average. Statistically, 53% of those in receipt of a student loan are currently likely to pay it off in full. Projections, however, indicate that those in the new system, only 23% are likely to pay off their loans. Mr. Lewis ended by saying that the new system effectively moved payment for higher education from the taxpayer to the student, and could be seen as amounting to a graduate tax of 9% on earnings above £25,000 a year. In Wales, schools are being urged to review their uniform to make it cheaper for families, according to a report on the BBC website. However, the report also says that the Welsh Government has stopped short of calling for school logos on clothes to be ditched, instead saying they should not be compulsory. Education Minister Jeremy Miles said families should be told about changes before the end of term, but head teachers said they were being asked to consider change at what is already a busy time of year. The request came after a consultation which asked for views on how the uniform cost burden could be eased for families struggling with the cost of living. Families on lower incomes can apply for a Welsh Government grant of up to £300 to help with the cost of uniform, but this hasn't always eased the worry for parents. TES Magazine reports on comments made by Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson at last weekend's NAHT conference. In a message to Head, she said Labour will ensure pupils are taught by specialist teachers in each subject. She commented that schools are facing a perfect storm in recruitment and retention in the teaching workforce, and that this was forcing more and more schools to rely on non-expert teachers. The Labour Party analysis found that more than 1 in 4 physics lessons in the past year has been taught by a non-expert teacher, whilst 1 in 10 maths lessons are taught by a non-expert. It also said research indicated that some teachers were delivering lessons in subjects where they had no relevant post-A-level qualification, including 2 in 3 computing teachers and 1 in 4 design and technology teachers. The comments did not include any clear detail of how the party plans to tackle individual subject shortages. Staying with the recruitment theme, ITV News posed the question, do Britain's schools need more male teachers? After research showed that around 1/4 of schools in England don't have a male classroom teacher. Some experts argue that it means young people could miss out on having male role models, although others say it's the quality of the teaching that is important, not the gender of the teacher. The article prompted many to comment that during a recruitment crisis, it was inappropriate to focus on gender rather than skill. This was backed up to an extent by a Channel 4 news piece that focused on National Education Union comments that teachers in England are leaving in droves. The report focused on numbers in the profession after the Department for Education asserted that there are more teachers now than over a decade ago, although they did acknowledge that the need has also grown. The NEU raised the concern that within 5 years of qualifying, 1 in 3 teachers leave the profession. These are figures based on those published by the DFE. This has been a pattern for over a decade. The failure to meet recruitment targets has created further gaps in the workforce. Between 2010 and 2021, vacancies in schools have almost trebled for both full and part-time posts. The programme also featured comparisons of class sizes in England, Scotland and Wales. Smaller class sizes are often seen as a way to reduce workload and therefore could make the profession more attractive. The research shows that Scotland has the lowest average class size amongst the home nations, but the UK compares unfavourably with class sizes internationally, the UK having class sizes above average when compared to Greece, South Korea and Germany. The feature highlights the issue of workload and recruitment as another core aspect of industrial action. Finally, to mark the coronation of King Charles III, the DFE announced that it was joining forces with the Eden Project to send thousands of packets of wildflower seeds to primary schools across the country. In an initiative designed to mark the event as well as help children learn about biodiversity, around 40 rugby pitch-sized meadows could be created. The plan was met with enthusiasm by some, although many have criticised the cost of this at a time when funding for schools is so hotly debated. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Jo Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, this week I'm going to talk about revision. Lots of our young people are turning to social media for advice, and the hashtag study tips is full on trending. Get me using buzzwords. I am so down with the kids. Anyway, this could be a secret weapon that you could untap simply by being a devoted listener and not skipping past me on Podbean. We all know there are millions of factors that come into play, like sleep, nutrition, hydration, actually being in school and actively participating, but that doesn't matter on social media. And let's face it, any revision beats no revision. So here is what I've found. Read it 10 times, say it 10 times, write it twice. No research quoted, no posh name, just a good idea that our kids are listening to because it isn't being said by their teacher. Yet. Another I found was use flashcards. I mean, why have no teachers ever thought of that? It's okay though, now social media is telling our young people to do it, they will. Just provide cards, writing utensils and a link. One of my favourites, give yourself no other option. Remove all distractions. Switch your phone off and put it in another room. You have no other option but to be incredibly bored or study. Yes, this is a technique that is trending. There are loads of good tips out there, all of which we clearly have never tried to use with our pupils. Let me finish with something nobody has ever thought of. Make a revision calendar. Mind blown. We could have been recommending this for years. There are even newly developed methods with catchy titles like the 2357. No, it's not a new Netflix series. You count backwards from the night before the exam, 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, and 7 days, and they are your revision sessions. All of these tips and more have only just been invented, so we seriously need to encourage our young people to get on social media and learn how to revise in the countdown to exam time. As always, if you have a tech question or any revision tips, why not get in touch at TT Radio Official. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Okay, so we're back, and Amy, you've got a child doing GCSEs at the moment, haven't you?
I have, yeah. So my eldest is, he's got a week to go, and then he starts his GCSEs. So yeah, we're in revision mode here. I feel like I've used the best of my kind of evidence-informed practice teaching to get him to learn things. He knows a lot of stuff, but I know a lot of stuff too. I think I'm ready for the exams myself.
Well, yeah, I too have a son doing GCSEs, and we were on Of Mice and Men and looking at how to get quotes to stick in our heads today. So yes, I feel your enthusiasm, shall I say, not pain for this. So yeah, it's great. So let's get back to our topic, and let's start with a definition of small in relation to schools. And there doesn't seem to be a nationally agreed definition of what constitutes a small school in England. The organisation Working Together categorises schools as small if they have fewer than 210 pupils on roll. And Working Together expanded that a little bit further and thought we'll introduce a further category of very small schools, which includes schools with fewer than 110. And we both know there's some really super tiny ones doing a fantastic job out there too. And as well as, of course, very small and small rural schools, there's also some very small urban schools, which include market towns or towns serving a primarily agricultural community. And in these circumstances, isolation, deprivation, recruitment and retention can be really, really tricky. And they face the same challenges as small rural schools. And of course, there's been a lot of small school closures, very sadly, haven't there? If we look back to, say, 1980, when there were about 11,500 small primary schools, that has dropped significantly, and there's about 5.5 is the figure I've got here in 2018. So, Amy, why do you think the number of small schools have reduced, and what factors have contributed to this trend?
Well, I think there's a lot of different reasons that small schools have closed down over time. One of them is pupil numbers. low pupil numbers makes the budget low and the school become unsustainable, which is, is a reality but a shame. And actually what we're not just missing the school if small schools close. What we're missing often is the hub in the centre of the community. And you often find in rural villages, the pub closes, the post office closes, and the school closes, and then the community kind of loses its heart. And that's probably the reason. It's probably a financial reason that the schools have closed, really. And you're quite right about recruitment and retention. In some areas, recruitment and retention is really tricky. In some areas, and I know it's very much the case in the schools that I'm aware of in Derbyshire, teachers love working in small schools within their communities, but then that also does mean that teaching staff are quite expensive. Brilliantly experienced, which is really important for mixed stage classes, but often quite expensive, and that is difficult for school budgets. So it's a perfect storm of tricky things that are happening, meaning that some schools do unfortunately close.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we shouldn't really lose heart, though, because at the BERA conference entitled Small Schools, Big Issues, and that was only in June 2021, a Small Schools Manifesto was agreed. So that's very exciting news, isn't it? That we have got lots of organisations really championing and really looking and valuing the uniqueness of small schools for that. And I think, as you were sort of saying, that success really demands a holistic response from all the stakeholders in the rural environment, because, as you were saying, there's so much at stake if small schools go, and they really are the hub of the community. And certainly during the COVID pandemic, that really shone brightly, didn't it? And just thinking about what you were saying about the expertise in small schools, and I'm thinking that, if we look at countries with remote communities like Australia and Norway, and, in other sectors like healthcare too, they've really addressed some of the issues very well and are really looking at things like getting the right students, recruiting from perhaps rural backgrounds really increases the chance of teachers returning to teach in rural communities. They're looking at training students closer to rural communities to ensure that students have really positive and happy, successful experiences of rural schools. I know in countries, for example, Australia and Canada, have situated major teaching and research units in rural areas, and a policy which has had real proven success in increasing recruitment. And that real exposure to rural practice during teacher training is so vital, of course, and really matching the curricula with rural needs and really ensuring that curricula include rural topics to enhance the competencies of professionals working in rural areas. That tends to lead to increased job satisfaction and retention. And of course, that has to be balanced with the costs, as you said, of keeping the more, say, expensive teachers on board. It is quite a sort of difficult balancing act, isn't it? But sorry, Amy, did you want to jump in there?
I was just going to say, the recruitment and retention issue obviously is it going to be an issue everywhere. And there are, particularly in coastal areas, rural schools that really struggle with recruitment. And we're all going to have to look a bit differently at how we recruit and retain teachers and how we are flexible in supporting staff who want to work part-time or different hours. Or I was listening to an interesting statistic at a conference this week that 40% of new graduates are going to work from home in their first job. And that's something that we can't really compete with as schools. But we're going to have to think more flexibly about how we do that. And it's a challenge for all of the sector, but particularly for small schools. And actually, I was really interested and excited that Teach First are going to place some of their students in rural schools last academic year and next academic year, which is really an exciting prospect because, we're taking great graduates and they're going straight into rural schools. And it's very different to the normal Teach First model of perhaps schools in trickier areas. But it's a completely different challenge, and it's still a very challenging role. So that's a positive step forward.
Absolutely, and I'm delighted. I'm just looking through the chat, and we've had a few texts in, which I think is a good time to share. And Claire Bills, who I know is a very successful head teacher of a small primary school, And she's commented that flexible working can really help. It can really help the budget, can really attract the best teachers in small schools. And she's put that she totally agrees, and says that sadly small schools are often in the community that they serve. They often heard of the community they serve. And she's also added that the new ECT framework doesn't seem to support small schools with the need for a separate tutor and a separate mentor. This can be hugely challenging. And that might actually put off ECTs from applying, mightn't it, if they're worried that, that those roles somehow might be smudged, or it might be dumbed down, or they won't get the, the real deal. Do you have, any thoughts on how, the challenges of small rural schools supporting ECTs?
It's really tricky. The ECT framework, I think, is a positive step, and it's really informed and turning out some really brilliant teachers at the end of their ECT years. But it is a challenge in small schools because the tutor and the mentor is often the same person, because there isn't anybody else to do it. So I had an ECT this year, I was the tutor, and because there wasn't anybody else to do it, whilst also being the head and being a teacher 4 days a week. So it's a real huge amount of work to take on an ECT in school, but they bring so much benefit and so much, life, and they're just out of training. So yeah, that is something that's worth thinking about. But it is a bit of a concern. But like everything in small schools, we all wear lots and lots of hats. And so, particularly at Carsington, where I work, we felt like it was important to take students, to make sure that students from our local university, which was Derby, which is a brilliant PGCE course, and brilliant students have always come to us from Derby, that we give them the experience of small schools, and we have placements as much as we can. But of course, with that comes all of the mentoring and all of that is required, and it's another hat you have to wear. So it can be tricky. But equally, we always love to have the extra pair of hands. We love to have somebody with extra ideas. So for us, PGCE students and degree students were great. ECTs also great, but a little bit harder to manage, just as Claire said.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's brilliant. That's really good to have that perspective. And I like your positivity shining through as always there, Amy. So just thinking sort of about collaboration, because certainly from my experience of small schools, that collaboration is so important. And I was lucky enough to be introduced to the concept of Ubuntu recently on a training course, which is an African saying, roughly translated as "I am because you are," and really conveys a sense of working together and interconnectedness, which I believe is absolutely crucial for small schools. We couldn't thrive without that collaboration and that real sort of working together and realizing that there's always things to learn, and that support network, which is so key. So Amy, what are your experiences of collaboration, and have you got any examples to share? And why do you feel that collaboration is so essential in small schools? And what would you say to a teacher, leader of a small rural school who's listening tonight, who doesn't really know where to start with creating a network or a collaboration for support, maybe is feeling a little bit exhausted or overwhelmed?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think all the way through my career, in everything that I've done, it's always been standing on the shoulders of giants, and talking to people and asking what other people are doing and finding out. And generally people in the profession are hugely generous and will help each other out, and always give each other a leg up when they need one. And actually, as a small school leader in a standalone small school, I can imagine that it can be quite isolating. You don't have a big senior leadership team around you. You maybe only have 1 or 2 teachers in your school, and it's quite easy if you don't. I should imagine it's quite easy if you don't collaborate at all, to kind of feel very lonely. So my school was part of a 4-school federation. I was the head of school, and we had an executive head. So we had like a ready-made collaboration between 4 brilliant Derbyshire schools, and we worked really, really closely together. And that was, and that still is a joy of working within those schools. And the landscape is looking a bit different now than it was when I first started teaching. And there are more and more academy trusts, And there are some academies across the country with lots of small schools in them that are really thriving and really doing great things for their small schools, because the academy understands that small schools just have to work a little bit differently. They're not worse, they're not better, they're just different. And so that's great. And then there's kind of informal collaborations, and certainly for my career and for, I don't know, just general well-being and being able to ask questions and find out things, the kind of informal networks of people I find really helpful. So perhaps Twitter isn't quite what it once was. There's a lot of fighting on Twitter at the moment, but Twitter's been great for me to connect with people. And of course, we run the Small Schools WhatsApp group, which has been a great source of positivity. It's just, the questions on there, there's no question that's too small. People ask anything that they want to know about their small schools, and there are people on there all the time who will just freely give their expertise and knowledge and share ideas. So that's a fabulous place to go to collaborate and feel less alone.
Absolutely, definitely testify to the WhatsApp groups. And I think when you've made a connection with somebody at, say, a conference, and then you've got that follow-on support, and then, as you said, you don't feel stupid asking something, and you get that help straight away, then that is so powerful, because it's a very, very tough role at any time, particularly now with all the external challenges. And just to know that you can reach out, and somebody's got, has probably faced a similar issue in a similar context, is really, really invaluable. I'm just going to read out a couple of other texts we've had in that are linked to what we've been chatting about, just because I think you'll be interested in these, Amy. And I just got one in from Jo Luxford, and she describes herself on Twitter as a cheerful principal of 3 tiny schools. Wow. Hats off to Jo. Definitely a small school champion. And she also describes herself as an optimist and an idealist. And having had the privilege of meeting her also at a conference, totally can relate to her being a complete optimist, which is exactly what we need right now. Exactly the sort of leader of not just 1, but 3 beautiful schools. So Jo has added that she has an ECT at each of her teeny schools, as she describes them. And she says they are amazing. They're making the logistics work. To enable having an ECT has been totally worth it. So that's great to hear. And she always tells them that if they can do this job here, they can do anything. What a great message. Because as you were saying, you're wearing so many different hats, aren't you? And you're having to sort of juggle an awful lot and react to things, react to pressures, staff shortages, perhaps have things changed, at the moment's notice. And if you can cope with that professionally, it really does prepare you for lots, doesn't it? And you've got a very bright future ahead.
For sure. And I think I was working out that all of the, during my time at Carsington, everybody who had worked with me who'd then left, everybody has gone on to a senior leadership position, even if they'd come in as a newly qualified teacher, as it was, because you just wear so many hats. You're exactly right. You learn so much and you know so much so quickly. There's no choice, because you get involved in everything, which is completely brilliant.
That is a really good point, Amy, because I think in small schools you're given that opportunity to lead, aren't you? So if that's something that, well, perhaps you might not know that you like that, but if you're given that opportunity and somebody puts their trust in you and believes in you, that's huge. So you're building up that wealth of experience quite early on in your career, and it's really going to stand you in good stead, isn't it? And Claire Bills has also added in. She's texted to say she totally agrees. She's got a second year ECT at the moment. She said they're amazing. They're really happy. Whereas many ECTs she knows perhaps aren't as happy as her. She said they feel valued and loved, but can't pretend it isn't challenging in a small school. Brilliant point, Claire. And, that's brilliant that they feel valued, isn't it? And supported and loved, because, it's a tough job, isn't it? And so many teachers leave within the first 5 years. So getting that ECT experience right, that's all credit to you, Claire, I think, doing that, isn't it, Amy? Because that's brilliant.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And if you're one of a team of 3 teachers. You work very tightly together as a team. So, you know, an ECT amongst that team is just a lovely place to be, and loved is exactly the right way to put it. Claire is quite right. You know, in a tight team like that, you work so closely together that it is a brilliant place to be. And of course, you don't just wear a lot of hats. You teach year groups often. If you teach a mixed day, the knowledge you gain, I mean, it's a fast learning curve, but yeah, a brilliant one.
Absolutely. I used to teach a 3, 4, 5, 6 class, and you know, my knowledge just increased overnight with that challenge. Absolutely loved it. Really unique, special experience, which I believe has really prepared me well for all sorts of future challenges. So absolutely agree. Your curriculum, you become a real expert, don't you? And all those sort of skills such as flexibility and just, you know, rolling up your sleeves and getting on with it, that small schools prepare you brilliantly for that.
Yeah.
And now just coming on to innovative thinking and thinking about, you know, small schools. You were talking earlier about how teachers in small schools really do have to think on their feet, really have to be creative and innovative, and school leaders too, in really making it work for their unique context. And, you know, thinking about rural schools curriculum, perhaps grounded in reflecting their, you know, context and the community it serves. And I was reading recently about small school in Cornwall taking their coastal location as a way to develop their curriculum and pedagogy to really suit the local community. And I think small schools do an excellent job of ring fencing the uniqueness of childhood. And you know, I was thinking earlier about how Martin Luther King, he didn't start with a strategic plan. He started with a dream. And I think, as, you know, a small school advocate, you know, I think that's so important, isn't it, that we still value dreaming a little bit in a small school context, so that nothing is sort of kind of ruled out quickly. People are really, you know, allowed to think of all possibilities and think about what could possibly work in their context. And I think small schools do that absolutely brilliant, this innovative thinking, and really kind of, you know, that's what I meant by sort of punching above their weight, if you see what I mean, in really thinking outside the box. And just interested to hear your views on that.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. It is thinking outside the box. So quite often I get approached by schools or MATs often that have got a small school that have joined them, and they're not quite sure how to deal with this small school because the curriculum that the rest of the MAT use doesn't fit, and they've worked out that doesn't fit for mixed age classes. And so they're asking, you know, how do we possibly make this work? It's about thinking about what can work rather than can't work. So there are lots of times when perhaps you might have looked at a scheme you could buy in, or sat in a conference, and it's very easy to think, well, that just won't work in my class because I teach 4 year groups together. But actually, some amazing things can work, and it's often about thinking outside the box about what you can do. And then there are occasions when being small means you can do so much more. So something that has just popped straight into my mind is with my infant class, I had a tiny class at the time. I think fish. I can't remember how that fit into the obviously knowledge-rich curriculum. It could have been before those days, but we were learning something about fish. And our local town, one of our local towns, is a spa town and happens to have a tiny little aquarium. So between me and the teaching assistant, we got the kids in the car and we all went to the aquarium, and we could just do it just like that, which was part of the magic of being in a small school. So it definitely has to be a can-do attitude. It takes looking at things a little bit differently sometimes, but I don't believe there's anything you can do in a big school that we couldn't do in a small school. And there are some things that you could do just because we were small. Another thing is the Christmas play. So by the time we got to the end of year 6, the children were so used to being in every single Christmas play that really nobody was shy, nobody didn't want to main part, and everybody was up for it. So children would come in reception and be nervous and a bit shy, and by the Harvest Festival in October they'd be reading in church or singing or something like that, and that was part of the magic of being in a small school.
Absolutely. The children really do get given those opportunities to shine, don't they? Because there's less of them. So they're really developing their confidence, and they're, given opportunities to perform and to play in sports teams, perhaps more so than a pupil in a larger school that may not get a look in. So that's brilliant. And I love that about seizing opportunities and being bold and being courageous. And it's absolutely wonderful to see that going on in schools, and teachers feeling really empowered and supported to do that. And I think that links with the culture of the school, really valuing that ethos. So that's brilliant to hear that. So I think, let's be bold, let's be brave, let's have those dreams, and not to write it off as idealism, because as you've given some really good concrete examples there, and certainly looking at knocking off any barriers to that. So Amy, I'm just thinking your passion's clearly shining through tonight. What drives you to be such an incredible advocate for small schools? Where does your passion come from? What fuels your drive?
Question. So, well, I'll be completely honest with you. Before I moved to Derbyshire, and there were schools in challenging circumstances, and I was part of a programme for the Department for Education, and I went from school to school in special measures, and helped. It wasn't responsible for, but helped kind of move those schools on. And then when I had my third baby, we moved back to Derbyshire, which is where I grew up. And I just got the first job I could get in a local school, and it happened to be a small school. And that one was one of the four that then made up the federation that I worked in. And it was an outstanding school. And I have to tell you, I found it quite hard to start off with, to work in an outstanding school, because I found that everybody was so nice to each other. And it was really, really hard to work out quite how much you could kind of tell the children to sit smartly on their bottoms, or, the normal kind of language that we use, which was very different to what I'd experienced in inner city schools. So I found it quite hard to start off with. And then I moved from that school to another school in our federation, which was in requires improvement at the time, and I became head of school there. And it was just a really lovely place to be. It was just a fabulous school. It was just a great community. The parents were on board. It had challenges, like all schools have challenges, but there was, they were like our team. They were Team Carsington was what we called them. And so eventually I loved the school so much, and we could be so flexible in our planning and do such brilliant things for the children and for the wider community. I actually moved all of my children to school with me, and I taught my youngest. I taught from reception all the way up, and I've got two boys as well, and they were in the junior class at the same time. So I didn't actually teach them, but they were there together. So that made the school even more have, part of my family. So for the years that I worked there, it certainly was a really important part of our family. And yeah, and that's why. And it was just, it's the magic of a small school. It's a feeling of everybody working together and pushing together in the same direction, and everybody knows everybody else's business in a good way, and we all look out for each other, and just a great place to be.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, small schools are often described, aren't they, as families, and when the children just speak so innocently and naturally about the school being their family, that's just lovely to hear, isn't it? And just had somebody text in now to say, working in small schools really allows you to know the children so well. Seeing my year twos blossoming in terms of their reading, for example, knowing what their starting points were in reception is so special. That's what's so special about small schools. That's great, isn't it? Because you do get to know the children, all the children really, really well. And one thing that I always think is lovely is seeing that buddy relationship between the year 6 and reception. It's just precious, isn't it? It's just beautiful. It really is lovely.
We once had an Ofsted inspection, and the Ofsted inspector said, we're surprised to see that the year 6 boys were playing with the reception girls football outside, and actually we hadn't even thought of that as a thing. It's just normal. The receptions would come in and the year 6s would take them under their wing, and that's just how we did it.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant, isn't it? Really, really lovely. With the children really just leading that relationship. It's so special. So just moving on then, thinking about Ofsted, and this is just such a huge issue, isn't it? Because small schools are, as we've said, totally unique, and their curriculum may not look like the preferred Ofsted model, but that doesn't mean that they don't provide a brilliant curriculum and educational experience for the children and the communities that they serve. And I think, Amy, you've had some really interesting conversations with Ofsted, re the fairness of the inspection framework, and you've been a real advocate, really communicated well with them, haven't you, to convey the challenges, the particular unique challenges faced by small schools. Are you able to share any updates or dates on that, and can you offer any comfort to perhaps some listeners out there who may be in the Ofsted window and might be feeling a bit worried right now?
That's a good question. I'm not sure about the answer to that. So I've been part of the a small schools kind of reference group that Ofsted set up, and it's a really interesting group because the point of it being set up is that Ofsted really were recognising that small schools were different. Things might look a bit different in small schools. The curriculum still has to be rigorous. It still has to be knowledge based. Of course, it has to be all those things. Because if we're saying we can't do those things in small schools, it's a little bit like saying the education isn't as good. And actually, we know for sure that that's not true. But Ofsted really wanted to, I suppose they were trying to find out what were the right questions to ask, what did they need to be aware of going into small schools. And it was actually really positive that they were engaging in that way. And I think on reflection from what came out of that was that, yes, small schools have to do things perhaps a little bit differently. Things still have to be as great for those children in a small school as they would be in a huge primary school in the middle of a city. But whatever you choose to do in your small school, think about it carefully, make some sensible choices, and then advocate for what you do being brilliant. If you can justify why you've done what you've chosen to do, then that's the way to do it, because you're doing the very, very best you can for the children. And so I would say my advice for anybody who's in the window is think carefully about what you're going to do. Your curriculum will be ordered. You'll be doing brilliant things in your school, and then advocate for that when Ofsted come in and tell them why you have made those choices. You don't have to pretend to be a big school. You're not a big school. You're a small school, and that's what makes you special. And just be brave and advocate for that.
That's brilliant advice, and just really having the courage of your convictions and being really proud, and we do what we do because, and having those conversations, and I think saying those words to the inspection team as well. We're really proud of what we do round here. This is why, and exemplify it. I think that's fantastic advice at the moment. That's great. Well, we've got lots of comments on the chat about the Small Schools Manifesto. So that sounds like that's been a really, really positive thing. And Jo's commented on the chat that she loves that it states that we are the asset centres for innovation in education. Well, isn't that brilliant? And I think that sums up what you've been saying, Amy, as well, that small schools really are the centres for innovation. And the smallness and the size, ironically, can also be a real strength, can't it? Because you can try things out a lot more easily often, can't you, in a small school? And you could end up being the shining example for others in a way. So that's really good to hear. And I know the National Association of Small Schools, that's a real beacon of hope and does an awful lot to nurture small schools and really, really champion them, which is great. And I was reading recently that the NAS has funding to develop a real greater understanding of the nature and types of collaborations throughout the country. We were talking about that earlier. And it's got plans to explore the most effective collaborative systems and structures that small schools are employing to really maximise the expertise within their ranks and ensure the best possible educational opportunities and provision. So it's brilliant to hear, isn't it, that there's lots of enthusiasm, commitment, support for small schools, and a real sort of I think it's a real chance to really stand back and really evaluate the successes. It's brilliant to hear. It's so nice reading on the chat, and I can't read them all out, but just the lovely successes and the happiness and love that's really shining in small schools at the moment. And perhaps we don't hear enough about that because there's a lot of doom and gloom and external pressures. So it's a wonderful sort of opportunity. I hope this show is the beginning of something that people really come together and celebrate, you know, the uniqueness and the extraordinary positives, you know, and just the sheer brilliant work that's going on in small schools right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And Joe's comment is a great one. That and you're quite right that small schools, they're not behind big schools. They can really be centres of innovation. And it is because we can do things so flexibly, decisions and try things without having to turn a huge ship on the way. We can, you know, do things the next day. And so that does make them really agile, and you know, we can change things quickly and do the very best we can for the children.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just thinking, we haven't really touched on governance, have we? And I know that, you know, recruiting governors with time, energy, the right skill set is a real challenge, isn't it? Have you got any advice for schools who are perhaps struggling to fill their governing board positions?
Yeah, so governance is an interesting thing in small schools, particularly if they're standalone and they need a whole governing body of their own. I think my biggest advice probably would be to try and, it's important to have parents and people from the local community and probably the diocese, because a lot of small schools are church schools, on your governing board. But I would also try and look outside, because it's sometimes tricky, or it's always tricky to recruit governors, but you need the governors with the right skills. And you need to carefully formulate the skill set on your governing body so you've got the right people. But there's definitely something to be gained by having somebody with educational experience in a bigger school, to just bring a different perspective. Because you know, if you have only people from your community who have always lived in your community, then it can be a bit narrow. So I think that would be my biggest piece of advice if you're looking to recruit some new governors. Although, as you said, it's not that easy.
No, not at all, not at all. But again, you know, they've got a potentially very rewarding job to do. And so it's definitely worth, isn't it, people coming forward and taking that on. So just thinking about staffing and recruitment and retention, and, you know, as we were saying earlier, it's the very situation where arguably we need the most talented and the most resilient staff, but the odds are stacked against us, or they can be sometimes, can't they, with this? And yet we were talking earlier about, you know, if you get the right attitude and staff are really loved and nurtured, and then they're empowered to take things on, well, the world's your oyster, isn't it? So I suppose it's just the challenge is getting that message across and out there, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think there's working in a small school can be great, and it is challenging. And it's interesting that you talk about resilience. I have small schools aren't for everyone, are they? But I have had Harry, who works in a tiny island school. She loves her school, and she's really interesting circumstances. And she's written a couple of paragraphs for me to read out if we've got time for that, Finola.
Yes,
and she demonstrates. She definitely demonstrates for sure resilience and determination in her role. So Mary is a teacher on the tiny island of Herm, which is described by some as an island paradise. And she's written a couple of paragraphs. Shall I read them out?
Yes, please. That would be brilliant.
Okay. So Mary's written, she can't join us, but she wanted to tell us this. Tiny island of Herm has been described as an island paradise. 20 minutes away from Guernsey by boat, it is barely 1.5 miles in length and less than half a mile wide. The island is well known for its white, sandy, almost Caribbean-esque beaches, variety of flora and fauna and woodland. Neither cars nor motorbikes are allowed on the island, which has a permanent resident population of 70 or so, including builders, shopkeepers, engineers. On this island, there's a pub, an 11th century chapel, where we perform the Nativity every December, self-catering cottages, a hotel, 2 campsites, a shop and a school. And since 2005, I have been in the unique position of being the sole teacher in that school. So then Mary goes on to say, teaching in such a titchy school on such a titchy island is exhausting, practically tricky and physically tricky. I live on the neighbouring island of Guernsey, so my commute is 20 minutes by boat and then a 10-minute walk up the hill to the school. It's lovely in the summer months, accompanied by the occasional school of dolphins, but the little stretch of water can be treacherous in the winter. I don't get seasick, but I've been pretty scared in the huge waves. My modes of transport have included ribs, fishing boats, small charter boats, and the regular ferry, which takes 7 people. And then she's written, getting physically fit and resilient supply teachers for the odd occasion when I'm ill has always been tricky, especially in winter. There are only a couple mad enough and brave enough to accept. I quite fancy having a go at it myself. There's only one schoolroom and it can be isolating at times with no colleagues. I have lone worker status with an emergency radio. Only once have I had an accident in school where I walked into a wooden pole in the wet, windy dark one January while staying over in a storm and ended up with post-concussion syndrome, which was very scary. Wow. I've become adept at looking at weather forecasts, so I'm usually aware of incoming storms. I keep an overnight bag in the small school and ready meals in the freezer. Multitasking and adaptability, like most small schools, are key requisites of teaching here. All supplies have to be ferried across by boat, and because of inclement weather, the school has to house resources from EYFS to Year 6. I have to be well stocked for emergencies and keep them all stored in one schoolroom. I have no experience. She had no experience of teaching in small schools before this, but absolutely loves it. The curriculum and teaching and learning have to be adapted to make it accessible for all ages with one teacher. Drama and literature are key tools, and we do a Shakespeare play every year. I was lucky enough to achieve a master's degree in the advanced teaching of Shakespeare, and I am passionate about teaching it, particularly in the outdoors. Our PE is mainly sailing lessons on the neighbouring islands. The children, like with any small school, encounter a wealth of experiences unique to the situation, and they develop resilience, courage, self-confidence beyond their years. I absolutely love it and believe we should foster and encourage such unique schools. How fabulous. I'd love to go and visit Mary's school. Thank you so much for Mary for writing that in.
Oh, absolutely. What a role model to the children. And what can I say? The world needs more Marys. I think we need to give Mary her own show. She needs to write a book, doesn't she? Because those anecdotes were fantastic. I'd love to hear more.
I think Mary's just written a comment. I absolutely love working in the
school.
That's fabulous. Thank you so much. School.
I'm looking at the chat. There's lots of love for Mary tonight, and she deserves that. Quite right too. Wow. Keep going, Mary, because it sounds like you are doing an incredible job, and those children are very, very lucky indeed to have you. You sound absolutely fantastic, and thank you for sharing, because it's just so uplifting, isn't it, Amy, to hear people on the ground with all these unique set of challenges just doing such a fantastic job.
Absolutely. And for the children, quite fabulous.
Oh no, that's brilliant. So our show is drawing to an end, and I don't know whether you've got any final words, Amy, for our listeners out there on, as we call, the unique brilliance of small and rural schools. I think you've done a brilliant job of really setting out the unique context, but really maintaining that sense of positivity. And I think it's been really uplifting. I'm feeling very motivated and ready to face a new week, having spoken to you.
Absolutely. And I think exactly that. I think my message, and if I'm asked to speak at conferences or do some writing about small schools, my message is always the same. Small schools are notable. Small schools are a brilliant place to be both a child, we know that for sure, and also a teacher. And it's really important that we look at ourselves in that way. Small schools are brilliant places to be. They're important for their community, great places to be a child. So we're certainly not a deficit model.
Absolutely. I love that, starting with that and not a deficit model, and just really valuing the resources that you've got, with the children obviously being the main one, the adults, the teachers, the governors, the community, everybody. That's just wonderful. That's really good. And I think, Amy, as we go into a new week, a 4-day one, I'm going to quote the words of Alison Peacock, CEO of the Chartered College of Teaching. And she says, to teach and lead with compassion, empathy and kindness. That's what we all need to do. And your future self will look back with the knowledge that you did your very best, even in the most challenging of circumstances. And I think that quote's just sums it up and is so relevant to everybody who is involved in some way with small and rural schools. So it's been a huge privilege, Amy, to have you on. My very first show. I couldn't wish for a better guest, someone more knowledgeable and passionate.
You did a brilliant job.
Oh, it's been so lovely. It's been absolutely brilliant. Loved every minute of this, and thank you so much.
This programme has been brought to you by the Happy Confident Company. Our clinically approved, ready-to-go wellbeing and mental health programme will help your pupils thrive. In only 10 minutes a day, you'll be able to deliver social and emotional learning and wellbeing tools throughout your school. To find out more, visit us at www.happyconfident.com.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.